All right, we're good to go. So I see Russia is here. Let me just let her onto the stage. All right, and then if Ruchi, if you can mute your mic on the Twitter Space, Catherine too. Everybody, if you're not speaking, just make sure to mute your mic. Okay. All right, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an amazing group of speakers, some of whom haven't arrived yet, but hopefully will. So thank you for tuning in. I'd like to start by sending our hopes and prayers to our friends in Morocco after the devastating earthquake that struck their country. Last estimate that I saw was 2,122 killed and 21 injured, which is massive. And I just wanted to say that our hearts go out to them in this time of great tragedy. So for everybody watching on YouTube and joining us around the world, please know that you can also join our live Twitter spaces during the event. And we have an open mic space after the event as well, where you can speak with us directly. You can ask questions, express your opinions, etc. On YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, anybody who's watching the live stream, you can post comments, and there's a chance that our speakers will post them to the screen and respond to them. So please do engage. If you enjoy the live events, you can support us by liking and subscribing, generate more engagement, help more people get involved in the conversation. If you want to be notified about upcoming events, you can sign up for email and SMS text updates on my website, danielsadon.com. Our speakers are incredibly busy, so they may not stick around for the open mic afterwards, but if they do, then you'll get to talk to them too. Otherwise, I'll be there. At this point, I'm going to just hand it off to Emily to make her opening remarks, and we'll take it from there.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Daniel, can someone confirm? They can hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us for this. I'm really, really happy to see that this topic is being put on the agenda throughout the Jewish world, the pro-Israel world, and the human rights world as well. I think that this is something that really, an issue that impacts pretty much every corner of the earth, for better or for worse. So I'm glad that we have such prestigious people joining us this evening to Evening Israel time, to give us more insight on what's happening in Iran. I will be very brief with my introduction because I really want to get into the issues with the people who are experts on some of these topics more specifically. But in general, for me, as a journalist, as an Israeli, and as an American, this is something that I've grown up knowing was an issue, but has only really come to the forefront of the international community with the killing of Mahsa Amini almost 1 year ago. And this month, I think we can expect to see a lot more activity when it comes to what's happening on the ground in Iran. At least I hope so. I hope that we have a minimum number of casualties, but knowing how the regime is, I think we're in it for the long haul, and it may get worse before it gets better. When it comes to the Iranian issue, the way that I see it, there's really three main issues that we're facing right now. The first faction, I guess, or aspect of the issue that we're facing is human rights, of course. And this is what we've heard so much about just in the last year that I actually have argued was missing from the conversation prior to the killing of Mahsa Amini. I think a lot of people in the Western world, especially in the United States, aren't really aware of the extent of how evil this regime in Iran actually is. And in a way, I think it's a good thing that what has happened has shown a light on some of the human rights atrocities that are occurring, that are taking place. And I think that it's incumbent upon all of us, whether we are academics or journalists or just individuals who use Twitter, to speak about this issue and to continue to raise awareness as these issues come up. Now, they can be small issues like that of, the Israeli athlete who shook hands with the Iranian, who has now been suspended from sport, period, suspended from sport in Iran. So these types of violations and persecution to the arrest, torture, sexual assault of journalists such as Nazila Maroufian, the one who has been arrested multiple times for interviewing the uncle of Mahsa Amini, to more severe crimes, as we have heard about with the executions, with the arrests of the family members of protesters who were executed. I mean, there really is no limit to the extremes and to the depravity that we're seeing from this regime. And I think that's something that needs to be routinely put in the face of the Western world, because we don't see them taking this issue seriously enough. So human rights is the first issue. The second issue is the, of course, nuclear issue and the funding of terrorism. Now, obviously, as an Israeli, this is one of the issues that's the most important to us, because Israel will not accept a nuclear Iran. In addition to that, we know that the regime has been paying, upwards of 60, 70 million per year to Islamic Jihad and to Hamas and to Hezbollah. So they're really arming the whole region surrounding Israel, and that's intentional. And we've seen an uptick in terrorism and in violence against Israeli civilians, and we know that that is directly related to what is happening with the Iranian regime in Iran and what they are supporting and calling for. Now, this is actually something that impacts the rest of the world as well, even though I think the European Union and the United States and Canada too maybe haven't taken it as seriously, at least until recently, when it comes to the terrorist activities and money laundering and IRGC activities on foreign soil. We know that they're not afraid, they being the Iranian regime, are not afraid to kidnap and to even kill or assassinate citizens, whether it be Israeli citizens or American citizens, on foreign soil. And this is something that I think needs to be taken much, much more seriously, because, when we hear people say crazy things on the internet, like the Ayatollah, the knee-jerk reaction for someone from the Western world is to say, oh, they don't mean it. But what's different about the situation is that that regime actually means the things that they're saying. They actually mean the threats that they are making, and they need to be taken seriously, because they have proven that that is what they will do, even at expense to themselves. The third issue that we're facing is the international community, both being under threat, as I sort of talked about a little bit, but also just in general, the lack of response. In recent months, we've seen a huge issue with the Biden administration negotiating behind the back of U.S. Congress in order to ensure the release of 5 American citizens. Now, on its face, absolutely, I support releasing American citizens. They never should have been held there in the first place. But on the other hand, at what cost? And the Biden administration has agreed to give them up to, I think it's $18.76 billion in sanction relief in the form of unfreezing assets that are being held in Iraq, that are being held in South Korea. And I think that this is just absolutely obscene. I think it's such a slap in the face, because you are literally in the billions of dollars incentivizing hostage diplomacy. You are giving the Islamic Republic a reason to kidnap more foreign citizens. And this is something that should never, ever, ever be done. And I think that whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, or I don't care who you vote for, this is a major, major issue when it comes to international relations that impacts every American who plans or has traveled abroad. And I think that everybody who has the ability and the privilege to choose their elected officials and to choose their democratic leadership needs to take action, needs to be in touch with their elected officials about this issue and urge their representatives to do something about it, because this is really unacceptable that this is happening, and that it will cost lives. This is something that will have a high cost, both in the Middle East and throughout the entire region, but also throughout the world. So with that, I want to wrap up, because as I said, I don't want to take too much time, and I want to hear from everybody here. So Daniel, I don't know if you want to introduce Jason.
Sure. Now, I don't see Jason in the Twitter space for some reason. Oh, Mordechai's here. Jason, you actually have to be in the Twitter space in order for us to hear you. Same for Ben.
In the meantime, well, hopefully Jason gets on the Twitter space. I just wanted to say I did see the question about the Mossad chief's remarks today at the Counterterrorism Conference in Herzliya. I did read that, and we'll be discussing it later, I'm sure, because I have lots of comments, and I think it's something that really should be brought up. It was a great update.
Absolutely. Okay. We're waiting for a couple of people to connect. I see Lisa is coming.
I sent a speaker request. So can you on Twitter?
Oh, Jason, you have to unmute yourself on Twitter.
Okay.
You have to unmute yourself on Twitter,
Okay.
and then you can speak. Yeah, there you go.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me now?
Jason?
Hi, do you hear me now? Oh, do you hear me now?
Yes, sir. There you go.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. So
Whoops.
I'm getting a lot of here. Let me work on this and you someone else.
No worries at all. We will come back to you. So next on the agenda, we did have Dr. Kedar. I'm not sure if he is here yet.
He is.
Let me check in the space. I do not see him. So we can circle back to him and move forward to
He's
the
here,
next person we had, which was Lisa.
He hasn't accepted speaker.
No worries. No worries. We'll move on. Lisa, are you here?
I'm here.
I see Lisa in the video and not the Twitter Spaces.
Hi, Dr. Kedar. Welcome.
Hi, how are you all? Do you hear me?
Doing great. Yes, sir.
All right, Lisa, we'll circle back to you. Let's start with Dr. Kedar.
Well, when I am trying to understand what happens here, especially between the United States, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, to tell you the truth, I'm very much puzzled. How a policy which is viewed as planned policy, maintained by the State Department and the White House, is actually acting constantly against America's friends and allies, especially Saudi Arabia and Israel, while it is directed to strengthen and to empower the enemies of America, means Iran. Don't forget that you can never hear in Israel death to America. Never you can hear it in Riyadh or in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, but you hear it time and again in Tehran and in many other Iranian places. And in spite of this, the American administration bends backwards in order to appease the Iranians. I have absolutely no idea what is directing them. I'm afraid it is that Barack Hussein Obama is still working there behind the scenes. Nobody hears about him. Nobody sees him. He is, very well behind the scenes, but he is conducting, that's what I feel, that he is the one who still conducts the American foreign policy vis-a-vis Iran as a continuation of the JCPOA of 2015. The infamous JCPOA, which he was behind, he wants it complete. And in my humble view, this is actually the only explanation which I can find when it comes to the American policy vis-a-vis Iran on one side and vis-a-vis Israel and Saudi Arabia on the other side. The cold attitude to the Abraham Accords, which is more than obvious when it comes to the American administration, is another proof to this assumption, because don't forget that the Abraham Accords were achieved in the days of Trump. This is, you hear me?
Yes, we
Do you hear me, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is actually what even more motivates Obama and his successors, Ms. Biden, who was the vice president in the days of Obama, to continue with this policy, the cold shoulder vis-a-vis the Abraham Accords, because this was an achievement of Donald Trump. So, all in all, this, in addition to what is being said, that America is more concerned about China, and America wants to close the file here in the Middle East, yet I'm not sure that this is correct. Because what we see today, the American forces in Syria, it doesn't mean that they are leaving the place. They are meeting, with the Saudis and with the Israelis, and there are all kinds of negotiations between Israel and the United States with the participation of the Palestinians and the Saudis in order to find some way how to go forward with some kind of mutual recognition between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which will be Biden's either legacy or his ammunition for the elections, which will be in a year and 2 months. So he also wants to have some kind of achievement, and don't forget that the achievement between Israel and Saudi Arabia can be viewed as bigger, larger, more important, more significant than the Abraham Accords between Israel and the Emirates. So, all in all, this is, on the in a nutshell, what I understand from American foreign policy, which is not so, not so productive, if to say the least, because what happens is that Iran now is emboldened, definitely because of the American attitude, to a degree that today the head of the Mossad, Dadi Barnea, here in Israel, actually spoke in Herzliya in the International Counter-Terror Conference. He spoke specifically about our intention to target the Iranian leaders if they continue to plan to carry out actions against Israeli targets, either inside Israel or in the territories here or abroad. Apparently, he knows something. Dadi Barnea, the head of the Mossad, he wouldn't say such a thing only because he wants to say it. He said that Israel thwarted dozens of attempts to hurt Israelis carried out by the Iranians, and he actually warned in a way which cannot be clearer the leaders of Iran that they are the guys who will be targeted if something happens to Israeli targets, whether in Israel or abroad, by Iran. And he wouldn't say it unless he had strong information about this Iranian attempt. So here we are, Israel vis-a-vis Iran, while America tries to appease the Iranians. And for me, it's rather, puzzling. What the heck is pushing the American administration to such a behavior? First of all, vis-a-vis their friends and allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia, and on the other side, to try to appease the Iranians in such a way. And don't forget that China is also a player in this area. So things are rather complicated, and American behavior is very puzzling.
Dr. Kedar, this is actually something I was thinking myself when I saw the potential release of $18 billion to this regime. I remember sitting with another friend who works at a think tank and saying, who is benefiting? Who is benefiting from this deal? Because it's not the American people. It's certainly not the people in the Middle East, both Arabs and Jews. It's not Europe. So who are the people that are benefiting in the American administration or in someone that they're allies with? Because it's not America or their allies. So I think you're exactly spot on about, you know, what the American foreign policy under Biden is doing. It's very concerning to say the least.
It's not only this. By empowering the regime, whoever empowers the regime, whether the Europeans or even the Americans, they actually are acting in a very, very strange way against the Iranian people who do not want this regime. I would say that the people in Iran who are satisfied with the regime is something between 3 and 4% of the people, those who benefit directly from this corrupt, cruel, vicious regime of Iran. And by supporting this cruel, vicious regime, you actually, or the Americans, whoever supports this regime, actually acts directly against the people of Iran, the poor people who are oppressed in a way which people cannot even imagine. They are killed en masse in the streets. They are persecuted. And recently, I read that the Iranians are installing cameras everywhere in the streets, in many towns and cities, and surveillance equipment which they got from China in order to collect proof against those in the streets who walk and maybe say something against the regime or do something. So now they can see them, the big brother can watch them and see what they are doing and identify them by their faces. And this is something which they got from China. And again, it's even more mind-boggling that the Americans, whose democracy and human rights and political freedoms are the slogans which they believe so much in, they are supporting a regime which is as far as could be from these concepts of human rights, political freedoms, and now don't forget, we are commemorating this poor lady, Mahsa Amini, who 2 years ago was murdered by the regime, by the regime because she dared to go in the street with her hair veil, not according to what they expected. So, and of course, oppression of women, gays and lesbians, and so forth. So, and really, it's mind-boggling to think that no other than the Democratic Party in the United States and the Democratic President, Joe Biden, who is so concerned about Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia and what the Saudis did to this poor man, but he doesn't care about millions of Khashoggis, of people who are being murdered and persecuted and impoverished and whatever you can, whatever you like in Iran. And in the minority areas like the Ahwaz, where the Arabs live, and the Kurds and the others, they are using cranes in order to hang the people in the streets until they die. And the Americans don't care about this. Really don't care. They support the regime, which is involved in so much oppression and killing and murdering, including women in Iran, as we saw during the last year or even more, because of the revolt. This revolt in Iran did not come from nowhere. This revolt is against an oppressive regime, which surprisingly is supported by no less than American Democratic administration.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the hypocrisy that we see from some select members of U.S. Congress as well. Ilhan Omar, she's a champion of BDS when it comes to Israel, and yet when it comes to every single dictatorship, whether it be Iran or Venezuela or China or any other country, even Russia, she's suddenly against sanctions because of humanitarian purposes. And yet we see this policy, the same sort of thinking coming from the Biden administration, in that if you enforce or impose sanctions, well, the people are going to suffer. And the unfortunate reality is, of course, the people are going to suffer. But what's the alternative? And when you have hundreds of thousands of people who are in the streets demanding regime change, I think the least the U.S. administration could and should do is support the people and be the voice of the people. So hopefully we can get to that. I don't want to cut you off, but at the same time, I do want to give everybody a chance to speak, just at least their initial few talking points, and then we can get back to some of the things you talked about. I think they're great talking points. So Lisa, if you are ready, we can move to you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
I'm not sure if we lost you or
No. Can you
delayed.
hear me? No, I'm here.
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're just doing opening thoughts on the topic. Is that?
Yeah, a few of your initial points, and then we'll delve more into some of the topics.
Just a few of what things that I heard and just kind of sparked some thoughts in my mind. You asked about who's benefiting from this in Washington, because obviously it's not the Iranian people, it's not the American people. So who is it? It's a lot of people. And the reason I say that is because I take frequent trips to Washington, D.C. I do briefings here and there. And the most recent briefing, or I should say the one I actually did 2 briefings ago, was in February. And I came back from that trip to DC. I did 2 small briefings for members of Congress and Senate, and then had the opportunity with a group of colleagues to go door to door to a handful of Senator and Congress, members of Congress's office, just to talk about specific topics in the region. And I walked away from that trip saying, oh my God, and I tweeted this, and it was kind of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's saying that the Ayatollah has more friends in DC than he does in Iran. And everyone was like, oh my gosh. And I said, if you know, you know, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's because it runs so deep, this support for the regime. It's not just about the billions of dollars that they're going to release. It's not just about wanting to get back into the Iran nuclear deal, a la 2015, President Obama. It goes so much deeper than that. And if you walk into any congressman or senator's office in Washington, D.C., and say, you know what, I have a great idea on how to curb Hezbollah in Lebanon so that the Lebanese Free Army and the Christians can get, a leg up. They can start nation building and do more for themselves. They'll be like, do not mention Hezbollah. You cannot punish Hezbollah while this administration is in office. Mind-boggling. I mean, it's a terror organization. America acknowledges that it's a terror organization, but you cannot punish them. Why? Because you have to go one step further. They're a tentacle of the Iran regime, and we're not looking to upset the Iran regime. You cannot talk about the Houthis. You cannot punish the Houthis. You can't. We had them punished. We had them under sanctions. That was removed. They kind of went back and forth on it because the White House was pressed so much on this topic. But the point being, it runs very deep. And whatever influence that the mullahs have bought in Washington, D.C., it's so profound that it will not be something that could be removed or changed. Facts will not change this. The people running into the streets will not change this. If you talk about human rights, it won't change this. And it's very, very unfortunate because there is not one good reason for the mullahs to stay in office. Whether you care about geopolitics, whether you care about terrorism, whether you care about human rights, whether you're looking at global jihad, whatever it is, there is no reason for this regime to stay in office. And to the person who said there's about 3 to 4% of the population in Iran who are with the government, I think that percentage might be a drop higher, and I'll tell you why. The middle class has been disappearing in Iran for a very long time, so you have the lower socioeconomic brackets, a good percentage of them being very close to the regime with the handouts. If you remember, it's almost like here in the United States, right? So if you're on welfare, you kind of love the government, right? And on the other end, you have people who have become very, very wealthy over the last 44 years. If you look at them, they're very modern in the sense, and many of them live here. Their children are in Orange County or in New York City or in Boston, gallivanting with, designer brands and Ferraris and whatever. And we know all those stories. But that's because they also benefited from and are continuing to benefit from this regime being in power. So you have clusters of those 2 economic brackets. So I think the percentage might be a drop higher than that, but that's where their constituencies lie. And with that, I'll stop. I want to give other people a chance as well.
Okay, thanks so much. I mean, I think there's so many things that I want to go off and continue on about them for, hours, but I want to give everybody a chance to speak as well. So I don't know, Jason had some technical difficulties initially. I'm not sure. Are you back with us?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, great.
Just on
Yes.
just on Twitter Spaces now. Well, it's sorry everyone for the technical difficulties. It's great to be with you. Thank you, Daniel and Emily, for the kind invitation. And I think that this is a very important topic. As many of you know, and has been stated already, the Iranian people are going to be marking a very important anniversary on September 16th, and that is the anniversary of the murder of Mahsa Amini at the hands of the regime's morality police. And I think that as we look back over the last year, we see a lot of strengths in the movement that's taking place inside the Islamic Republic. And this is not ending anytime soon. I think that we have to view this as a marathon, not a sprint. And so I think the Iranian people are demonstrating increasing fearlessness, which is unprecedented. And that is a very important dynamic that is not going away. Acts of civil disobedience with women not wearing the hijab at all. And that is really, really significant. So these are important acts that we do need to pay careful attention to. At the same time, I think that the leaderless nature of the opposition inside Iran is a strength in certain respects, and that is because it's fluid and it's harder for the regime to decapitate its command structure, and that is an important dynamic as well. But at the same time, we are not seeing massive amounts of people, millions in the streets yet. That doesn't mean that the sentiment isn't there, but that has not taken place, and we have not seen defections in the security services yet, despite there being a debate in the political elite over how to respond to this revolutionary sentiment that is prevailing over significant segments of the population. So those have been weaknesses. In addition, we have not yet seen the degree of labor strikes that will be necessary to cripple the Islamic Republic, and that will also be required, and it's something to watch for in the future as this movement matures and evolves. I think that another weakness in the looking back at the anniversary has been the response of the international community. It has really only revolved around rhetoric and piecemeal sanctions on individuals who have no assets in the West and are unlikely to travel here. And that is just not good enough. There have been some good developments, I would say. Booting Iran from the UN Commission on the Status of Women, the establishment of a special investigative mechanism at the UN Human Rights Council. Those have all been positive developments, but we see at the same time, and this has been most intensively demonstrated over the last few months, sadly, the United States and Europe throwing out a diplomatic lifeline to the regime, making the familiar overtures and signaling willingness and in some quarters the desperation for diplomacy. And I think that sends a signal to the regime that there are no consequences and that it is open for business once again to discuss sanctions relief. And I think it sends a horrible message to the Iranian people that we are just putting words on paper and giving strongly worded press statements in support of their struggle. But at the same time, there is a failure, particularly in the United States government, of to even accurately in public emphasize or enunciate what their demands are. We haven't seen the U.S. government actually being able to utter their demands clearly, which is for an end to the Islamic Republic. And so that definitely sends a signal, and it's not a good one. And I would also say that we're seeing increasing confidence on the part of the regime that it can have its nuclear cake and eat it too. And what I mean by that is it's being rewarded diplomatically in recent months for absolutely nothing. It normalized relations with Saudi Arabia. It has been given an invitation to join BRICS. And these are important. It's not that these will make game-changing differences to the regime, but these are. This provides a propaganda opportunity for Tehran to signal to its people and the rest of the world that we're not isolated and we're not going anywhere. So that has been unfortunate, and I think it's also been unfortunate that we are seeing, of course, as some of the speakers have mentioned, the unfreezing of Iranian assets in exchange for the hostages. I think that the entire debate over the hostage deal is a symptom of a broader problem for the United States and its European allies. And that is that we lack a transatlantic strategy to deter hostage taking by the Islamic Republic. And what we have to crack down on the supply side and the demand side of that hostage diplomacy equation. So that is going to be important. And last and certainly not least, and I'll stop there, the United States just does not have an Iran policy or an Iran strategy. We're constantly putting Band-Aids or thinking we're putting Band-Aids on the issue when we're actually making it worse. And on the nuclear file, I think that the Biden administration wants this issue, the Iran issue, to be off the president's desk during the election. But kicking the can down the road carries great risk. And Iran is hardening its nuclear infrastructure. It's continuing to arm and fund its proxies and partners. And they can dial up and dial down their proxy attacks and their ability to escalate in different theaters on demand. And my concern has been that there's an absence of deterrence regarding the U.S. response to a variety of these provocations. So happy to discuss any of these topics further, and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I know, Ben, you have to go somewhat soon, so I just wanted to give you a chance to get to your talking points before you head out, so we can head to you, and then we'll circle back, I think, to Behnam we have next.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
So actually, we need you to request speaker in the Twitter space in order to be heard. You'll be heard in the stream, but not in the Twitter space. And Jason, if you can mute yourself in the Twitter space. Oh, okay. We can try while we're trying to get Benny up there, because I've been working behind the scenes to try to get him connected. I think you need to leave the Twitter space and come back and then request speaker. That might fix it. How about we go to either Rasha or, well, Eliyahu has also got the same problem. We got to get you guys into the Twitter space as speakers. I don't know if...
we have Behnam, no?
Yes, Benham's here. Yeah.
So let's start with Behnam.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much, Daniel and Emily, for helping put this together. It took about 10 years for FD to get me to do anything on Twitter. I still don't have an account, so thank you for allowing me to participate with one of the office's accounts.
I mean, you'll probably live longer as a result, just saying.
We'll see. DC also isn't the healthiest environment. But thank you all for the invitation. I caught a bit of Lisa and Jason and a few other folks' comments right before. Strongly want to second all of that, maybe add a few helpful footnotes for the discussion moving ahead. And maybe we can work backward, because I know even in the title of this, it's about Biden's foreign policy. And, listen, they knew they were coming into a highly politically charged environment. And there is a desire, I think, by this administration, with immense respect, to use everything in the Iran space in an ornamental and not instrumental fashion. And what do I mean by that? Support for human rights is ornamental. It's not instrumental. It's not driving the conversation on Iran policy. Trying to roll back Iran's nuclear program is going to be counterproductive if you end up, bolstering or supporting a Saudi nuclear program, for instance, or being poor on North Korea's nuclear program, all of that. And on the sanctions front, the administration inherited the Trump administration sanctions architecture, but since it did not politically or legally try to roll it back, it tried to kind of use and abuse the fact that these sanctions remained on the books. But as we saw with the spike in oil purchases, even when Biden was elected in late 2020, and then throughout 2021 with China, and even numbers that we have for this summer, for last month, for instance, it's a half-decade record high, 2.2 million barrels per day. So when we're looking at why is the Islamic Republic so confident, why is the Islamic Republic so bold, it sees an adversary which, to borrow from Jason, does not even have an Iran policy. It has a loose series of things that it's trying to do to create an impression that's to try to signal resolve, but actually in the net effect signals irresolution. And that's why we are actually headed for more dangerous times moving ahead, more dangerous time for Washington to be caught flat-footed the next time there is yet another Iranian popular protest against the regime. And mark my words, there's a century-long movement of the street against the state trying to establish representative government and an independent judiciary there. We've seen for the past 4 decades the Islamic Republic violently and brutally try to end that century-long mission. But mark my words, there will be more. There will be another. The string of protests that we've seen from 27 to present loudly are saying almost in every language possible and with slogans and with changing geographic and demographic variety that they seek regime change. And it's not just about the cool kids in Tehran, and not just Gen Z. It is literally the urban and rural poor, the downtrodden, the dispossessed. At the height of the Massa protests, at the height of the Zandhi Azadi protests, there were 150 different cities, towns, and villages across all of Iran's 30 provinces. There is a great amount of connectivity between different strata of society because the thing that animates them is the same, which is that the Islamic Republic is the ultimate plight, the ultimate reason the Iranian people have not been able to reach their potential. And in this sense, U.S. foreign policy needs to stop with the own goals, needs to stop somehow ending up empowering either politically through own goals that include, again, letting Raisi come to the UN to speak before the UNGA for the second time as massive protests and human rights violations are going on. And then also to stand with the Iranian people in principle and in practice. There's very few populations outside of Israel, the Middle East, and outside of Iran, the Middle East, where the strategic thing and the moral thing are the same thing. It's actually very hard to get those two confluence of interests there. Doing right by human rights policy, non-proliferation policy in Iran means, in essence, pushing back on the Islamic Republic. Trying to curb terrorism means, in essence, trying to stop those who are repressing the Iranian people's hope for change, and also exporting violent conflict and civil wars to the heartland of the Middle East, to the Arab world. There's consistently this disconnecting the dots on the Iran threat portfolio simply for the lack of not wanting to pay a political cost, that, as Jason said again, to kick the can down the road and not deal with the root cause of this. It's very much like trying to take a Tylenol when someone has a much larger and much more fatal prognosis. So I think the fundamental problem is philosophical. And until we get a change in the philosophy of the administration, which may actually at some point require a change in administration in Washington to get a more hands-on Iran policy, until we get there, I think I'm quite sad to say that from the White House, or at least from the executive branch perspective, we're going to continue to see more ornamental, not instrumental things. I think really where there's the chance to move the needle on the nuclear issue, the human rights issue, the missile issue, the drone issue, is really in Congress. There's 2 votes allegedly scheduled for next week. I think folks on the call may be aware of both the Massa Act, which so many communities have been helpful in supporting and bringing to the fore of members, as well as the Fight Crime Act, which goes after Iran's missile program and the foreign inputs and foreign exports for Iran's ballistic missile arsenal. So those are 2 things to watch, and places to put hope in and places to not put hope in. But I thought I'd give a 500,000-foot lay of the land, and forgive me for saying something tautological if anyone else has said some of this before. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, very insightful. Not so optimistic, but insightful nonetheless. Benny, are you ready? We've got the audio figured out. Okay, great. So let's move to you, and you can share with us more about what your take is on what's happening.
You can hear me?
Yes, but there's a very loud ringing in the background. Now it's gone.
And now?
Now I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me and us. It's a great initiative. Thank you, Emily and Daniel and all the friends, Jason, Behnam, and all the others. It's great to meet you here.
I think you have to unmute yourself in the Twitter space. And Jason, if you can mute yourself.
Oh, I'm muted.
Okay.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I think many issues were brought up and
I think we
so-
lost the sound. I'm not sure if it's your internet.
now is it
Now I can hear you.
okay? So many points were brought out and were discussed. Wow.
I think we need.
I think Elio is on the line.
Shalom.
This is Richard.
I'm ready whenever Ben is ready. Hi, Emily. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Catherine. And the speakers audience. Thanks for having me. Well, the title is, I'm not going to go like far away from the title about the prisoner hostage, nuclear and Biden administration. So I'm going to like give a very quick key point and then we can dig in more in details. And I hope Catherine's son will be okay. Thanks, Daniel and Emily, for this such an important topic. When we talk about politics, we should talk about economic and military and international law, and also the city and the countries which been involved in all of this. Because when the title is all about USA and Iran and Israel, also we have to put in our consideration the involved for China and Russia in ruling the veto against any sanctions, against Iran or Syria. Also, we have to put Syria as allies with Lebanon when it comes to Hamas and Assad and Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthi are the tails for Iran. Also, we can extend a little bit about the interest between Turkey and Russia and also Russia and Turkey and also Iran, and also the latest agreement between Saudi Arabia and also Iran in last March, according supervision with China. I mean, a lot. Also, we'll speak. Also, we can just like to refer, not to distract ourselves, to Venezuela and the foreign policy. When the gentlemen and ladies spoke about the foreign policy, we have to put our consideration. The Democrats always focusing on the human rights, but in this matter also we need to focus also about the gas and oil prices. Also, how it switched off when Biden visited Saudi Arabia, etc. And he didn't, even make a huge difference. We know that since 1980, the relationship between the United States of America and Islamic Republic of Iran, both parties were not that much good in a proxy war. For also Obama as the one of gentlemen, good speakers, all of them are good and excellent. Thank you for having them. It's an honor to be with them. Also, when when they spoke about Dr. Mudar, when he spoke about Obama administration, it's good, a very good point, because also we can tell that Joe Biden administration, it's applying exactly the Obama administration, nothing more than that. Especially when, you know, Trump withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018 and go further to maximum pressure strategy on Houthi. The Joe Biden administration right away when they took place, they took off, revoked the sanctions on Houthi, which is tails of also Iran. The Islamic Republican also responded by making significant progress. President Joe Biden also, after 2 years and 8 rounds of negotiation, we can tell that America and Iran has not much hasn't reached to any agreement when terms to revive the nuclear agreement. So now also you can see the conflict between the Republican and Democrats. Exactly, it's like a very war, you know, during the Congress. And I spoke one of the with Adrian. I wish him the best in California. We discussed before that the serious things, what is going on in the Congress, that the Republican is doing a press release against, they are always tough on Iran, which is good. The Democrats, they always believe in diplomatic, but also even when they want to do it, the diplomatic issues, they don't do it right. In matter of fact, there is a press release now on September 6th. It's happened in 2023. Hearing title "A Dangerous Strategy Examination: The Biden Administration's Failure in Iran." It's gonna take place this Wednesday, September 13. It's gonna be tough on Biden administration. There is gonna be a tough questions. What's going on? Because Biden administration, they claim that they tried to be very, you know, like pursue the diplomatic effort with the trying, and they claim that doing the settlement for the hostages, American 5 hostages and others, are nothing to do with the nuclear, which is completely, you know, doesn't make sense. Because even the State Department spokesman, Vident, I believe, when he said that the much fund will go, as Emily, you stated, 18 billions will be held in Qatar bank, will be only used by Iran for humanitarian transaction, which is really ridiculous because we didn't learn from history. When Obama released such tons and tons and millions of money back in, I believe, in 2013-14. I just want to remember the date. We believe, as a Syrian American, I remember that Iran used this money to do more massacres and to extend more money and more terrorists on even Israel's security and the other places, countries. So it doesn't make sense that this money gonna be just, you know, be controlled by Qatar and Oman under the supervision of United States. Also, Michael, the chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee, said that it was naive to think that Iran was not going to have any control over the money. Also, we'll see the, the Biden administration through, the lobby, what they are doing it right now. It's very weak lobby. Even you can tell, Emily, in the news that everybody said like, hey, it's been pissed off from Biden administration because you know what is going on. I wish we can talk about more the fund resources for Iran, from where the money and the capital came from Assad and its allies, and also the Laundry non-profit organization, its fake organization. We're going to talk about the oil. We're going to speak about what is going on when it comes to the conflict, when it comes to the Congress, also sanctions, and even the decision maker and lawmakers are not doing in the one voice in United States to be more tough in whether even the diplomatic. When you nail it, Emily, when you spoke about are we going to negotiate a criminal war? When United States last year or before 2 years ago, they host Mahmoud Abbas. He is Lebanon general. He is a criminal, war criminal. He helped Assad in massacres in Lebanon and also in Syria and against Israeli citizens, supporting also Hezbollah. United States host him here and welcome him here just to negotiate and do negotiation for the hostages, which is completely give the word that you can, talk on the same table with a terrorist, and or war criminal, which against international law. So this is all. I wish we can go with digging more details with this. So I will give my right now turn to somebody else, and we can do the second round and the third round. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rasha. Actually, let's go to Lisa before she's got to leave at 2 p.m. If you'd like to make some comments, Lisa.
We actually did, Lisa,
Oh,
already.
I was just coming back to her because she has to go.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I have to go, but I obviously I'm enjoying this conversation very, very much. I think all of it really builds up to the same idea that, there's such a global consensus, people who are working on so many different topics and emphasizing so many different foreign policy issues, all agree that all roads lead back to Tehran. And unfortunately, until we fix that issue, we're going to have to deal with a lot of these other side effects of what's going on there, and the regime being in power and now being even more emboldened with the money and the political clout that has been gifted to them from the Biden administration. I'll let other people, I know there's a lot of people in this conversation, so I know we're going to keep focusing on all these different aspects, from the economy to oil and terrorism and human rights and everything else. And of course, wishing the Iranian people a lot of luck and power and strength during this time. I know it's very emotional, as well as they feel like the clock is ticking. If they don't really strike now while it's hot, meaning this anniversary of the Masa Amini murder, it's going to be 40 more years. And I think this is the generation to get it back. This is the generation that looks at their parents and says, you guys are the ones who came out onto the streets, but you didn't have the courage or the balls, whatever you want to call it, to go and get your country back. And we're going to do that. And I actually am the daughter of Iranian immigrants. I was born in New Jersey, so I've never stepped foot on Iranian soil, but I also lived through that nostalgia. I cry when I see footage of the Shah leaving Iran, because I feel like I lived through that through my parents' stories. And I understand and envision the utopia that Iran was. Wasn't perfect under the Shah, but obviously compared to right now, if you contextualize it properly, given that it was 44 years ago, it was a utopia. And women were able to have all, full rights, go to college, do whatever they wanted to do, dress the way they wanted to dress. Same with men and across the board. So I think this is our generation that understands that if we don't get it back, that the following generation perhaps won't have that same access to these stories and have that same type of nostalgia from growing up and hearing their parents' stories. So I know that they are motivated. I know that they are really fueled by these stories and fueled by this heritage that they want to reclaim. So the best to them, and thank you all for tuning in today. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure to listen to all these wonderful speakers. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa. It's always great to speak with you. I guess now, hopefully, Benny is back with us. Yes? No? We figured it out?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
Perfect.
great. I already thought that the regime is affecting all of us. So, yeah. So thank you again, and sorry for that trouble. I agree to most of the points that were brought before. So I just go quickly to the main point that I want to make, that for me as an Iranian, it's very strange that we are talking about the Iranian regime for at least 35 years since the end of the Iran-Iraq war. They have no excuse to be as terrorist and as threatening as they are, and we should remember that this is a very weak regime. This is the main strange thing, that the whole world is dealing with a weak regime that is about only 400 or 500 people that are running it, but the whole world is frightening and crumbling from this regime, and we cannot afford that. We have to solve it and find new solutions, because all this talks about revenging against this point or that point in the regime, as the head of the Mossad said today. I don't know if I heard a new thing, and the most problematic word that he used in his words was "if they continue," but they are doing it for 44 years maybe for 35 years, okay, but they are doing it for so many years, and this if word should not be there anymore. They are guilty on everything that is happening to Iran and as a country or as a people. So but we have, and as it was said before, we see that the Biden administration is doing almost nothing, and make it so easy for the Iranian regime to do as he wants. And of course, Russia and China help them a lot. So the effort, in my opinion, should be against these higher ranked regime figures, if they are clerics or IRGC generals, on every aspect. If it's sanctions or condemning them or cutting their relations to everywhere in the world. We from time to time we hear that they travel to Canada or to Europe or to everywhere. So they should be chased. They should be hiding and not seeming so strong and do whatever they want. And we have to make any pressure on Biden administration to bring back the sanctions, to bring back the pressure. I don't understand how this is a year of elections and Biden administration doesn't care about the Iranian American votes. This is very strange for me. There are millions of Iranians in US and they don't care about these millions. So if they want their votes, they have to do something against the Iranian regime. And until that, Israel is alone against Iran, and this is the proof that the head of the Mossad talks today and brings up these issues, because Israel is left alone against Iran, and things can be only worse unless the whole world is united against Iran. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benny. I am trying to figure out. Oh, here we go. Emily dropped off from co-host, but hopefully we can get her up here again. Did you see my my co-host? Okay. Here we go. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get Emily up to co-host again. Did you see a message on your side? Emily, are you able to speak? No? Try exiting the Twitter space and coming back in. Okay. Okay. All right. Who do we still have up here who's connected and interested in speaking? We've got Mordechai, Jason, Benny, Rasha, Benham. Oh, here we go. Emily's coming back. And hopefully this works. Emily, are you we're running into a little bit of issues here with the Twitter space. No? Okay, 1 second. Okay, all right. I'm not sure what's happening. We're having trouble here getting Emily up as a speaker. Eliao, I see, just joined uh, and disappeared. What is going on?
No, there is such a report maybe on the space. So Emily, she need to, like leave the space and return back.
Okay, I think she just did.
All right, I'm back. You
Oh,
can
good.
hear me?
Thank goodness.
Technical difficulties. I was requesting to speak after my internet cut at the same time you were inviting me to co-host. But
Oh,
all I really wanted to do was to invite Eliyahu to speak.
okay, all right. And we
So I would love to hear from you, Eliyahu, and Ruchi. Eliyahu will be using a translator, and he's also on video. So without further ado, take it away. Eliyahu.
אוקיי. אליהו, קדימה.
שלום, שומעים אותי?
I hope you can all hear me.
שומעים אותי?
Okay. We actually
Ken,
can't hear
Shamim.
me.
כן, שומעים.
Ken? Okay. Okay.
אוקיי. אז ככה, שלום לכולם.
אני חושב שאתה לא מחובר לטוויטר.
לדעתי, אוקיי, לדעתי יש פה כמה סוגיות.
I think there are a number of issues involved here.
אני מחובר.
המיקרופון שלך מתנתק משום מה כל פעם.
רק שנייה בבקשה. עכשיו אתם שומעים אותי?
Let's try just connecting to the Twitter space without the video. That might solve the problem.
תנסה להתקשר רק דרך הטלפון, הטוויטר בטלפון.
It solved the problem for Benny.
Okay, so I think in the meantime, while you guys switch that, we'll just move to the next one and then circle back to you. I know that Eliyahu has been waiting a long time, and we're excited to hear from him. But I don't want to take too much time because I know there's been a lot of glitchy things on this thing. So, Catherine, do you want to say like a first sort of intro to what you're doing and what your main talking points are, and then we'll circle back to Eliyahu and then move into the discussion a little bit more in depth. If you're with us. Catherine. Catherine is not with us. I see. I think she dropped off and I have to readmit her as a speaker. So, Catherine, you're with us?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. My apologies for earlier, by the way. It's just stupid Wi-Fi. So first of all, thank you, Daniel, for organizing this. Rasha, thank you so much for the messages. I'm so glad that Emily's co-hosting, Jason, Ben, everyone present that I know. It's a pleasure being on this space with you. As far as what I'm doing right now, I'm actually working with ACLS, and we're doing quite a lot of research into the Islamic Republic of Iran. As most of you know, I'm an expert on the Islamic Republic of Iran for the simple reason that I've been there. I've seen what the regime can do, what it is about, and what they're planning to do to some extent, at least in regards to Israel and the Jewish community. And to the risk of repeating myself, what I really want to stress, and I'm not sure that everyone, at least in the West, is grasping the gravity of the situation, is that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not just a terrorist organization by definition, and not just fomenting acts of terror across the world via its proxies. It's actually also committing crimes against humanity. And something that I've raised many times before, but I want to raise it here because I'm hoping that it would land somehow. And this is something that the media has failed to raise accordingly. At least that's what I think. are the kind of tactics and the acts that the Islamic Republic of Iran, the regime, is willing to commit in order to silence the Iranian opposition and millions of Iranians' desire to claim their freedom. And I'm referring to the gassing of young girls. And what worries me is by not raising the issue and holding the regime accountable, and in particular Ibrahim Raisi, who has earned the title of Butcher of Tehran for a very good reason, is that we somewhat normalizing the horrors that the regime is committing. We also sending a very strong message to other terrorist organizations, whether or not they are affiliated to the Islamic Republic or not, that it is acceptable that if a terrorist organization is big enough and powerful enough and rich enough to have some leverage onto the international scene.
שומע אותי?
Sorry,
רגע.
can I continue?
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. Go ahead.
It's okay. They will understand and they will believe that there is no limit to what they can do in terms of crimes against humanity or crimes against people, full stop. And that's something that, for me, poses a real problem, because this coincided with the release of billions of dollars by the Biden administration. And of course, if you look at the timeline, this is not within weeks, it's months. But the message is very strong, is that you could gas young girls, you could commit crimes against humanity, because again, we're talking about gassing, and I want this to land somewhere. And yet the regime was afforded several billions of dollars to continue, because if we think for a second that the regime will not use this money, those funds, to commit other acts of horror, we are fooling ourselves. If we believe that we can contain the Islamic Republic and somewhat appease its leadership, we are fooling ourselves. The regime is geared towards export. We know this to be true. So many countries have fallen prey to the Islamic Republic: Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iraq. We have seen what has happened to those countries. And the other thing that I want to raise before I let someone else speak is the modus operandi that is being exploited by the regime. The regime infiltrates a country, exploits its weaknesses, infiltrate its institutions, and then break it down to nothing. Lebanon used to be a thriving country with a brilliant future ahead of it, and now it's a failed state, more or less, in terms of its economy, in terms of it's the sectarian tension that exists within the country, and the fact that Lebanon is no more a sovereign state in the sense that it's being run by a paramilitary organization that behaves like a terrorist organization. I'm referring to Hezbollah. If you look at Syria, Syria has been destroyed, completely collapsed. It's a failed state. If you look at Yemen, it's a failed state. If you look at Iraq, it's literally holding by the skin of its teeth to whatever sovereignty it has left. Its state officials are so terrified of making decisions that are beneficial to their people, because Iran is threatening their lives, that they don't do anything and they act as a client state of Iran. We can't continue to believe that the Islamic Republic will not expand this influence and attempt to infiltrate countries closer to our borders. And when I say our borders, I'm referring to Western capitals. If you look at the way that Iran has attempted and is succeeding in cracking Africa, if you look at the way that it's cracking into Latin America, and only a few weeks ago, an RGC commander came out quite openly saying that they want to control the Panama Canal. If you look at the way that systematically Iran wants to control access to certain borders, access to trade routes, access to airports. If you look at Yemen, that's what the Houthis are doing with the seaport of Hodeidah and Sana'a airport. This is what Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon. There is a modus operandi, and we're missing it. And our state officials are completely missing the mark, putting us in danger, putting millions of people in danger, because they still believe that better the devil you know, that they can broker a deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran, regardless of international law, regardless of the democratic values that they're supposed to represent and protect, on the belief that money will be made. And we can't, and I think that people have said it, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself, this notion that we can make a deal with the devil because in order to not disrupt world markets, in order to maintain some degree of continuity on energy markets, is folly. We are heading towards a wall. And what bothers me the most, and actually scares me the most, is that we are on the wrong side of history on that one. If you recall the 1930s, someone had to make a stand. You cannot imagine that terror will ever stop gaining ground unless we stop it. And if we don't do it now, and yes, it will hurt, and yes, it will be painful, and yes, it's going to be difficult, we're going to suffer more later. And the price that we will have to pay for our freedom, I'm not talking about Iranians' freedom, and it matters, but I'm talking about our freedom. The price will be too much. Iranians deserve to be free. They deserve political self-determination. They deserve to see a future that is ours. Even if we don't necessarily agree with what it will look like, it is theirs to build. It is there to craft. They have earned it. And I want nothing more than millions of Iranians to be free. And I'm sorry if I get a bit emotional, but I really mean it. Those people deserve it. They have suffered so much under the Islamic Republic. We have to support them. We have to accompany them. We have to show them solidarity.
I literally couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you for that. And I think that at least I can speak for most of us, if not all of us on this chat. I think we're all on the same page, definitely on the same page at that front. And I think one of the reasons this is such an important issue, even to me personally, is because, you know, we think about there's lots of human rights atrocities occurring all over the world, but not many of them, if we're being completely honest, not many of them have such a profound impact on the rest of the world. And that really is the reality when we're looking at the situation in Iran today. They have, unfortunately, the regime has a tremendous impact on the rest of the world, primarily right now, the Middle East. But with every day, we see more in Europe, more in the United States and across North America. And that is one of the many reasons that we need to be extremely careful about what's going on and continue to raise awareness and raise alarm bells about what's happening. We have at least one more speaker that we had scheduled on this, Eliyahu. I know we've had some technical difficulties. I don't know if the situation has worked out, but we'll try to go to you. And then I'm going to invite another activist who has requested to speak after that, and then we can move on to other issues. Eliyahu, are you with us?
אליהו, אתה איתנו?
Okay, I see him requesting. I'm going to see if I can bring him up.
Okay, looks like we've accepted him as speaker. And we are just about connected.
I think you can hear me now. Am I connected?
Ken, yes.
יופי.
Can you hear the interpreter?
Yes.
Okay. Good day to everyone.
אני חושב יש פה שתי סוגיות בעייתיות. אני הולך משפט, את מוזמנת לתרגם ואני ממשיך. אני חושב פה יש שלוש בעיות אקוטיות.
There are three acute problems here.
אחד זה שיטת הממשל. שיטת הממשל באיראן היא תיאוקרטית, לאורך הזמן עם מטרות מסוימות.
The first problem is the form of government in Iran, which is a theocracy, which leads to other problems.
לעומת זאת, שיטת הממשל בעולם המערבי, ארצות הברית, כולל ישראל, כל קדנציה של 4 שנים, ומישהו בא אחריו, הכל משתנה.
In the West, on the other hand, you have democracies where you have a 4-year term, and after 4 years, the government changes, and then everything can change. That doesn't happen there.
דינמיות של אסטרטגיות של ממשלות, זה מה שהמשטר האיראני מנצל אותו.
And the dynamism of the strategy of governments, that's what Iran exploits.
נקודה שנייה, כדי להביס היטלרים, בהיסטוריה צריכים סטלינים.
The second point is, in order to have Hitlers in the world, you need Stalins.
כדי להביס משטרים תיאוקרטיים כמו הרפובליקה האסלאמית, צריך טראמפיסטים ואף יותר.
Trump, no. Trump?
טראמפיסטים, המחנה של טראמפ, עם השקפת טראמפ.
In order to have... תחזור, כי לא בטוחה שהבנתי מה שאמרת.
אני אומר, כדי לנצח אנשים כמו היטלר, צריך אנשים כמו סטלין.
כמו סטלין. Okay, in order to defeat people like Hitler, you need people like Stalin. In order to defeat the regime in Iran, you need Trumps, people like with a Trump approach.
לכן תהליכים גדולים צריכים מנהיגים שיודעים להזיז את השולחן ולא לשחק על פי כללי השולחן.
And that's why to get these processes moving, you need leaders who know how to move the table and not play according to the rules around the table.
שתי נקודות האלה זה מה שבדיוק הרפובליקה האסלאמית של איראן מבינה אותו ומנצלת אותו.
These 2 points are exactly what the Islamic Republic of Iran understands and exploits.
ונקודה שלישית, שאיראן, המדינה איראן, שרפובליקה אסלאמית שולטת עליו, היא ג'וקר לטובת רוסיה, סין, המעצמות הקומוניסטיות אם אפשר להגדיר אותן.
And the third point is that the country of Iran, which is controlled by the Islamic regime in Iran, are jokers in the deck that Russia and China, which you could call the communist superpowers, are trying to exploit.
אנחנו זוכרים טוב מאוד, בשביל אסד, רוסיה ורפובליקה אסלאמית היו מוכנים להרוס 50% מסוריה ולהרוג 500,000 סורים.
We recall very well that for Assad, Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Russia were willing to destroy half the country of Syria.
בשביל איראן עם 1,700,000 קילומטר מרובע, 90 מיליון אזרחים, בין 5 מדינות הראשונות במשאבי טבע, סין ורוסיה, לא יוותרו על רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן בקלות.
Russia and China will not give up a country like Iran, which with its 1.7 billion square miles and 90 million people and having so many natural resources. They won't give up on that.
איראן היא דריסת רגל לרוסיה וסין בליבת מזרח התיכון.
Iran is a foothold for China and Russia in the Middle East.
איראן בשביל רוסיה וסין דריסת רגל במזרח התיכון, אותו מזרח התיכון ש45% מאנרגיה העולמית נמצאת בו.
It is a foothold in the Middle East, which contains 45% of the world's energy.
רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן שווה מפרץ הפרסי ובאב אל-מנדב, ש50% מהאנרגיה העולמית עוברת דרכם.
The Republic of Iran is equivalent to the Persian Gulf and Bab el-Mandab, through which 50% of the world's energy travels through.
רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן שווה לבנון, סוריה, תימן ועיראק.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is equivalent also to Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. Control over those areas.
רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן זה לא רק מחסה אמיני, הניתוח הזה הוא ניתוח רגשי לחלוטין של אזרח מול אזרח.
This is not just a rational analysis. There is a lot of emotion involved of citizen vis-a-vis citizen.
בשביל להזיז רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן, ביידן ואובמה וקרטר ואנשים ממחנה הזה לא יעזרו, הם לא יכולים להזיז משקל כזה גדול.
In order to move Iran, people like Biden, Obama, and Carter, they're not the people who will ever be able to move something as big as Iran.
אני לא רוצה להיכנס לפוליטיקה פנים אמריקאית.
I don't want to get into internal American politics.
כן דמוקרטים או כן רפובליקנים, זה לא קשור אליי, זה עניין פנימי של אמריקאים.
Republicans, Democrats, that has nothing to do with me. That's an internal political American issue.
אבל אני יודע דבר אחד, הרפובליקה האסלאמית של איראן הגרעינית, היא תהיה הבעיה הגדולה לכל העולם החופשי.
But I know one thing, a nuclearized Islamic Republic of Iran will be a huge problem for the whole world.
ואני רוצה לקחת את זה רק לדקה לנושא מקביל שלו.
And I would just like 1 minute to talk about a parallel subject.
לרגע תתארו לעצמכם מחר בבוקר רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן גרעינית.
Imagine just for a moment that tomorrow morning there is a nuclearized Islamic Republic of Iran.
הג'וקר הרוסיה והסין הופך להיות גרעיני.
The joker of Russia and China has become nuclearized.
המשטר היחיד שאחרי מלחמת עולם השנייה באופן פומבי ורשמי תוקף את בסיסים אמריקאים משיגה נשק גרעין.
This is the only regime that openly and publicly after World War II has attacked US bases and tried to achieve nuclear power.
המשטר שבלי גרעין מוכן לתקוף את ריאד ואת שדות הנפט ארמקו בסעודיה מחר בבוקר יש לו נשק גרעין.
This same regime that now, before it is nuclearized, is willing to attack Saudi Arabia's oil fields, the Aramco oil fields, and the capital Riyadh, tomorrow morning could be nuclear.
המשטר שעוצר חוטף תיירים שמגיעים למדינה שלו באשמת ריגול תיירים אמריקאים צרפתים מחר בבוקר הופך להיות גרעינית.
And that same regime that is abducting American and French tourists that visit their country and accuses them of espionage, tomorrow morning could be a nuclear country.
אותו משטר יכול לתת יכולת גרעינית של מזוודות קטנות עם אופציות קטנות למיליציות שלו.
A regime of that nature could design suitcase-sized nuclear bombs and give them to their militia.
עכשיו אתם מדינות חופשיות יכולות לבוא להגיד לסעודיה אל תהיה גרעינית?
So with that in mind, can any free country then tell Saudi Arabia, you don't have the right to be nuclear?
יכולות להגיד לטורקיה שדוגלת באימפריה העות'מאנית אל תהיה גרעינית?
Can it tell Turkey, which is trying to rebuild the Ottoman Empire, that it doesn't have the right to be nuclearized?
יכולות לבוא להגיד למצרים שרואה את עצמה ציוויליזציה העולם הערבית כמעצמה צבאית אל תהיה גרעינית?
Can they tell Egypt, which considers itself the leader of Arab civilization and a military superpower, can they tell Egypt that it doesn't have the right to have nuclear weapons?
יבואו יגידו המשטר הפסיכופת הזה, הרפובליקה האסלאמית של איראן, יש לו גרעין עם כל הבעיות שאליהו יוסיאן סיפר, למה שלי לא יהיה גרעין?
They'll come and they'll say to you, look, that psychopathic regime in Iran, they have a nuclear weapon, and after everything you've heard from Eliyahu Yusian, you're going to say that we don't have the right to have a nuclear weapon?
לכן הסיפור הוא לא רק רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן, אלא יום למחרת מה יהיה עם רפובליקה אסלאמית גרעינית של איראן, והעולם ייראה אחרת לגמרי.
So the question, the issue is not only the Islamic Republic of Iran now, but what the world will look like with a nuclearized Islamic Republic of Iran will be waking up to a completely different world.
שוב, הנושא הפנימי של ארצות הברית, פוליטיקה פנימית, לא קשורה אליי, כי אני לא אזרח אמריקאי.
Once again, I have nothing to say about the internal American politics. I'm not an American citizen. It has nothing to do with me.
אבל בשביל לעשות דברים גדולים, צריכים אנשים גדולים. עם כל הכבוד, תפיסת עולם של ביידן, קארטר או אובמה, לא יכולות לעזור למפלצת הזאת. לא יכולות לפתור את הבעיה המפלצת בשם רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן.
In order to do great things, you need great people. And with all due respect, people like Biden, Carter, and Obama, they are not the right people to deal with this monster that is the Islamic Republic of Iran. No.
עד עכשיו דיברתי במבט הביטחוני העולמי.
Until now, I have talked about the global security issue.
אבל אם רפובליקה אסלאמית של איראן תשיג גרעין, שווה שליטה של איראן פלוס רוסיה פלוס סין על לפחות 50% האנרגיה העולמית. זאת אומרת, האירופאים, אזרחים של איחוד האירופי ואזרחים של ארצות הברית ישלמו בכיס שלהם מתי שרפובליקה האסלאמית של איראן יחליט ומתי שרוסיה וסין יחליטו.
That means that the Islamic Republic of Iran plus China plus Russia will control 50% of the world's energy. And that means that the citizens of the European Union, the citizens of all of Europe, the citizens of the United States will pay from their own pockets when the Iranian regime decides they will pay and how much they decide.
אני רוצה רק משפט לסיום. אני עליתי ב-2003.
I'd just like to say one last thing. I immigrated to Israel in 2003.
אני עליתי בגיל 23.
I was
בשנת
23 years
2003.
old in
למדתי שם
2003.
3 שנים הנדסה אזרחית.
I studied civil engineering there for 3 years.
אני נולדתי בשנת 1980, בדיוק שנה אחרי הגעת חומייני לאיראן.
I was born in 1980, exactly 1 year after Khomeini arrived in Iran.
אני חונכתי על ברכי המהפכה האסלאמית, מאלף עד תו, כולל כל הדת, הלכה, אסלאם, שיעה, מאלף עד תו.
I was educated on the Islamic Revolution from A to Z, everything, the religion, the laws, everything.
שהאזרח האירופאי והאזרח האמריקאי לא יטעו לרגע.
And American and European citizens should not be mistaken for even a moment.
שלא אמריקאים, לא אמריקה, ארצות הברית המדינה, ולא מדינות אירופאיות לא יטעו לרגע.
And the US and Europe, any European country, they should not be mistaken about this for even a moment.
הבעיה שקוראים לו הרפובליקה האסלאמית של איראן, זאת לא הבעיה של ביבי נתניהו בלבד, וזאת לא הבעיה של מדינת ישראל בלבד, וזאת לא הבעיה של אזרחי מדינת ישראל בלבד.
The problem that is the Islamic Republic of Iran is not the problem of Bibi Netanyahu or of Israel or of Israel's citizens alone. Not at all.
יכול להיות אנחנו קו הראשון של האיום הזה.
We may be at the first line of this threat.
יכול להיות אנחנו הפולין של מלחמת העולם השנייה מול גרמניה הנאצית שישבנו בחזית.
We may be the Poland of World War II facing the Nazi onslaught on the first day.
אבל אני מכיר אותם מקרוב.
But I know them up close.
אחרינו יגיע תורכם, מהמדינות שלכם עד האזרחים שלכם.
After they've done with us, your turn will come. Your countries and your citizens.
אבל הפעם עם רפובליקה האסלאמית של איראן הגרעינית פלוס רוסיה וסין.
But this time it will be a nuclear Iran plus Russia and China.
תודה רבה.
Thank you very much.
תודה, אליהו. Thank you, Eliyahu. We are going to move to sort of the next type of discussion in this part, and we have a few more speakers that have joined in that weren't on our initial list, but we would love to hear from. In general, we've heard a lot of different takes from different experts on what the issues are. Some of the things that came up that I would love to discuss a little bit further are about the sources of funding for the lobbying efforts in Washington, D.C., one of the questions that I asked is who is benefiting from all of this? If it's not helping the American people, it's not helping world leaders, it's not helping democratic countries, then why does the American administration keep pushing a policy that seemingly is against all of the values they claim to stand for? So I would love if we can discuss that a little bit more. And in general, if any of you have suggestions for what can be done right now. What should our elected officials be doing? What should we be doing? What can be done from abroad or even on the ground in Iran? If you guys have a take on that, that would be great to hear. Those of you who haven't spoken yet, just start off by saying one sentence about yourself and what you do, so that everybody tuning in can get familiar with who you are and what you do. So I guess I want to invite Elika to speak.
And just before you do that, I'm going to post a link to the space where everybody can go and find out all the backgrounds of the speakers if you're wondering what their credentials are. And also want to thank Behnam very much for joining us. He's got to leave. I appreciate it. I hope you come back and speak with us again. Sorry, Elika, go ahead.
Sorry, no, that's okay. Just FYI, my battery's going to die soon. So if I just suddenly cut off, you know why. So yes, Emily, thank you for bringing it back there. I think that's a really important point of discussion because, you know, so often we talk about, you know, the disastrous hostage deal, and we have such great points of analysis, you know, why this is so bad, why this is encouraging more hostage taking, but we're never getting to the root of why this is happening in the first place. And I think this is my source of frustration because we're so good at identifying things, but we really need to spend more time getting to the source and how to combat that. So, you know, nobody is a stranger to the facts at this point that we have this, you know, Washington think tank that is really pushing for diplomacy with the regime. And this is obviously incredibly problematic. And I think one of the main reasons why we get to this point, because Emily, you yourself asked this question, well, why do they keep doing it if it's not to America's benefit? Well, the reason is because it is constantly provoking the think tanks are constantly provoking America's fear. So if you just Google or go into YouTube and type Trita Parsi, for example, you're going to see interviews over the past 5+ years. And every single one of these interviews is like headlined with big capital letters, must enter nuclear deal, otherwise war with Iran. This is the false dichotomy that is constantly presented over and over and over again when you're talking about relations with the Islamic Republic. You have this think tank that is saying if we don't enter into a nuclear deal, if we don't have diplomatic relations with this regime, then we have to go to war. Well, Trita Parsi's been saying that for the past 5 years. And no, in fact, when Trump was here for the 4 years between 2016 and 2020, he did the worst things that you could imagine, right? He had the maximum pressure campaign, droned Soleimani, who's the second in command of the regime. And was there any war? No, I'm not saying that I'm advocating for that, but that dispenses with the narrative that war is the alternative to diplomacy, because we've now seen the evidence that there's a period of lack of diplomacy and there was no war. The consequence to Soleimani was that the regime shot down its own plane. I mean, it committed terrorism on itself, you know? And so when you're talking about these administrations and the actions that they're taking, the obviously disastrous, horrible actions that they're taking, you know, we've got to put into perspective that this is based on a belief that this is the only alternative. And so, you know, even the points that they come up with don't even make sense. Well, we have to enter a nuclear deal because we're concerned about their nuclear enrichment. Okay, so you gave them $100 billion because you're concerned about their nuclear enrichment. So what do you think is going to happen with that $100 billion? Is this just not common sense? If you're concerned about nuclear enrichment, doesn't it make more sense to not give $100 billion to a country you're concerned about enriching? All of it is just completely oxymoronic, and it just goes back to that same trigger point, which is that, oh, but we have to go to war with Iran. No, you don't. That's never been on the table. That's never come up. Even in the worst relations in those 4 years, nothing of the sort ever happened. So when you go down to, when you follow that line, you realize that this is all just propaganda. And then it's propaganda to keep the regime in place. This regime is here because the Western countries want them here. Make no mistake about it. If they didn't want the regime here, they would be long gone. It started from the very beginning where Carter helped Khomeini get into power. And it has persisted ever since, because what these Western countries are faced with is the dilemma of, but what do we do about oil and these significant trading relations if they're not here? Now, if we get rid of them, are we going to have someone more favorable or less favorable to us? And so it always goes back to, you know, better the devil you know. So this idea of, you know, Western leaders, you know, maybe they don't know, or, you know, it's They know it's a choice. And so I think the only way that we can get around this is to continue to highlight not only the source of these decisions, which is the regime's lobby, but also exposing the decisions that are not based on general national security concern and trying to contain this nuclear program, but actually aiding them, and obviously aiding them. And then you get to the issue of, you know, when they say, well, diplomacy is the best course. Okay, so let's consider what happened when there was diplomacy, right? You got into the JCPOA, you said this was such a great idea, diplomatic relations are the way to go. And then what happened? You had another hostage exchange in 2017. Obama did another hostage exchange just 2 years later. So if this diplomacy was so fruitful as you claim that it is, how comes it's never working? How comes Bob Levinson is declared dead in absentia in 2020 because you couldn't get him back? I thought that diplomacy was the way to go, right? But it didn't work. And the hostages just kept getting taken. And it's just so funny to even have to explain this as though it's not so obvious to human psychology, what happens when you keep rewarding the same behaviors over and over again. Every single time the Islamic Republic takes a hostage, every single time they commit a bad act, every single time they send an agent here to assassinate us on US soil, what is the result? The result is a reward. Is it not just the most fundamental human psychology that the next thing that happens then is that, okay, let me do more of that, right? It's sending the regime agents back in a prisoner swap. In fact, when they got Olivia van der Kasteel in Belgium in exchange for Assadollah Assadi, you know, the Belgian government went as far as to create a extradition treaty to swap them. And it was just so funny and so shameful that they created this kind of faux treaty because it had none of the characteristics of what an extradition treaty has, right? So when you have an extradition treaty, you're essentially saying that, hey, there's someone in your country that's a criminal, and we're going to submit to you probable cause about why you need to extradite them back to us, right? Is the regime claiming that Assadi is a criminal to try and get them back? No, they're not doing that. That is a reverse extradition treaty. So the reason that I say this is to highlight the lengths the Western governments will go in order to accommodate and appease this kind of hostage diplomacy, right? And so what has the regime learned now? You will create laws to accommodate me. You will create fake laws that have absolutely no basis to accommodate my hostage taking. You will transfer $7 billion worth of assets to accommodate my hostage taking. So why shouldn't I do that? And now we have the newly announced Johan Floredes hostage, who no doubt is going to be exchanged for Hamid Nouri, who committed significant acts of terror in Iran, killing upwards of 30,000 Iranians in the 1980s. And why wouldn't this regime just keep taking more hostages to get back their terrorists when they know it works, when they can keep committing acts of terror and the only result is either financial reward or it is the return of their terrorists back to them? And so when you go back to it, it always goes back to who is behind these decisions, who is in the White House, who is their advisor, and why aren't we as a community? And can I just sidestep this for 1 second to say that it's so wonderful that we are now in these groups where we have Iranians and Israelis together, which something that, you know, in the past nobody thought would be possible. And so there's kind of like that silver lining where through all of this oppression and pain, you know, you have two nations coming together, which in the most wonderful way. And when you think about the downfall of the Islamic Republic, it's not just that it's the end of oppression. It's also the start of some just beautiful relationships, you know? Imagine that we get to, Iranians travel to Israel, Israelis travel to Iran, and, you know, it's such an amazing thing. But going back to what I was saying, you know, we have this huge community of people now, activists, people who are all united in the same goal. And the question is, why don't we have everything that I've said in the however long I've spoken, every single word that I've said goes back to who is advising those people. And so my question is, why are we not creating an alternative, a meaningful alternative lobby to advise the White House? And I will also just say that I agree with the statement that it is not going to be the Bidens and the Obamas to do this. And that is something that a lot of Iranians are going to have to wrap their head around. They are the types of individuals who are going to just kick the can down the road, as Jason said, which is extremely dangerous. And so these are the things that we have to start being aware of in terms of how are we going to act, not just diagnose what the issue is. We've diagnosed it ad nauseum. What are we going to do about it? And these are the conversations that I really think we need to start having. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so
much. That's actually really, really interesting what you said about how, it's not really the Bidens or the Obamas. And I think Eliyahu also echoed the same thing. He was saying it's not about partisanship, but I just, as someone who is Israeli and also American, I just want to emphasize that the way that the Islamic Republic works, and Catherine also spoke about this much earlier, that they are sowing dissent and they are sowing internal strife through social media, through PR, through their lobbying efforts, through organizations on the ground in Washington, D.C. And these are things that we should really be aware of, not because it's a grand conspiracy, rather because we know that this is one of the tactics that they have used for many years, and that now that they have new technological tools at their disposal, it's something they're doing increasingly more of. And so when you see things being phrased in these black and white terms, like you just mentioned, that the alternative to diplomacy is war, as if that's the only option, even though history shows us something else, remember that this isn't an issue of partisanship. And I've seen some on the left push back against more hawkish foreign policies by saying, oh, it's just warmongering. That's just the right wing trying to smear XYZ. I have personally seen Trita Parsi do this on his social media. And this is a way of discrediting the message that isn't partisan. This isn't a right-wing message to be tougher on the Islamic Republic. If anything, I would argue it's left-wing, because this is something that's so damaging to human rights issues, whether it's LGBTQ community or women's rights or any of the other issues that are impacting Iranians on the ground. So please, when you have an instinct to reject something because it's partisan the other way, that you happen to not vote, or the political leader that you happen to disagree with, think twice and think about the fact that the Islamic Republic is actively trying to divide people that way. And we see it all across the Middle East. I'm sure Russia can talk about this as well. And we see it in the United States as well. And we even see it in Israel a little bit. So this is something we have to be more and more aware of. And I totally agree with you that there is, I think, a need for an organized lobbying effort in Washington, D.C. on the part of people who actually represent the opinions of the people of Iran, and not people like Trita Parsi and the rest of Nayek. I know Loai has been waiting to speak, so I just want to give him a couple of minutes to comment, and then Rasha, we would love to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much, Emily, and thank you so much, Danielle, for the amazing space. I'm not a scheduled speaker, so I'm not going to take much time. I just want to say that I have a suggestion for what we can do on the ground, Emily. I'm a content creator of history and languages. I'm a researcher, and I love to change people with education. So the way I believe that people change is with education and with telling them things that they are not aware of. So what I do with my fellow Muslims about the legitimacy of Israel, for example, is showing them the real historical facts about the Jewish people and the history of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, and the history of the linking the history to archaeology. So I think the same thing should happen with Iran, by showing the connection between the Persian people and the Jewish people. Many of my Iranian friends here in the UAE, they don't really know that the Jewish people were never allowed to build their second Beit HaMikdash without the approval of an Iranian king named Cyrus the Great. Can you believe that? Cyrus the Great, who was called a Mashiach by Hanavi Yeshayahu, he said that the Lord hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem. وهو أوصاني أن أبني له بيتا في أورشليم. I believe that showing these great Iranian people, because I have lots of Iranian friends here in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, Emily. I see them very great people, very amazing people. The Persian people, the Persian heritage is really an amazing thing. And when I say this, by the way, it's not because I'm serving a government of Israel here or there. Israelis are not paying me, okay, except for 4 packs of Bamba every week, so that's something else. But I'm just saying that I'm not doing this for anyone. I'm doing this to show people that how close we are as Muslims and Jews, and how close the Persian people are to the Jewish people. So with education, with videos, with reels, we can do something on the ground to bring people together. This is what I wanted to say. And I also wanted to add one last thing. In 4 days, we are celebrating the 3rd anniversary of the Abraham Accords. May God bless this great deal, and may it come for years and years to come, inshallah, until one day the prophecy of Prophet Yeshayahu becomes true when he said, Lo yasa
about, like, they are, as a victim mentality, I'm sorry. And etc.
Okay, so I don't know if this is still streaming or not, but it seems that the Twitter space itself went down. And Daniel suspects that there was some sort of interference. So I'm going to close the stream for now, and maybe we will set one back up. But in the meantime, I apologize for the end. And thank you for joining us. Not sure what exactly happened. I know Daniel had some sort of computer problem. But it says that I'm not muted. I'm not sure. So I'm going to close this then.
guys hear me okay? Oh my goodness, everything stopped working. Everything. I don't want to sound paranoid, but like, yeah, everything shut down. No, everything shut down. Like my computer, my router, my phone, everything's down. I had to take another phone and connect on cellular. What's that?
Syrians.
We have
Arabs.
Saudis, we have Syrians.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's just that, but that's credit to you guys because you're doing an amazing job. So kudos to Daniel and Emily.
Well, hopefully, Daniel, there's not any serious damage to your computer. In any case, we did want to finish up, but I just want to give Rasha a chance to continue her thoughts, so that those of us tuning back in can hear what she had to say.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
I'll make sure to take this and add, some kind of explanation so people understand what happened, and then continue by putting the Twitter space on the video in the edited version, so they'll understand that it's just a continuation.
Great. Okay, take it away, Rasha.
Thank you very much, Emily and Daniel and Catherine. Well, I was like talking, then what's going on? I told advice even Daniel before we entered that not open any link because it's happened with us before. As Catherine mentioned, whenever we have this beautiful combination from peaceful people who seeking for peace and from different countries, definitely, especially Hamas and Hezbollah and those, evil people, they want just like to destroy and do report for everything. It's any space professional. So anyways, I wish, please, Daniel, send those links to Alika and other, maybe Luai and other speakers who were here. Then we can all keep going with the title as Emily started, very professionally title. I really would like to thank you, Emily, for all of what you did already in the beginning. It was amazing. So anyways, back to the subject. What I suggest for that, do you want me to repeat what I said in the beginning space, in the first space, or do you want me to just keep going?
Yeah, if you could briefly summarize, I think that would be good since we all got interrupted.
Okay, yeah, great. What I try to say, it's whether we have to know exactly how the lawmakers and how the decision been done in United States, especially if it's USA, it's institutional country. It's not like, somebody like a king and he can just order. So we have the Congress, we have the lawmakers, the Pentagon, FBI, CIA, reported from Israel, because Israel also is a strong allies for United States in the Middle East. We have the allies in Europe, etc. So all of this, make really like an effort how the decision been done in the Congress and then later in the foreign policy. And we have to really put an effort, as Emily, mentioned in the beginning, and Catherine. And I spoke with Catherine before 2 years ago. Thanks for her even, because she hosts us in her also foundation, amazing one. So we spoke about it, that whether you are from Saudi Arabia or Iran or Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, even Israel, even Palestine, if we all knows that Iran is the big snake evil, the head of the snake evil, and the allies, the tails is Assad regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthi, and all of it. We know that we should target the Islamic Republican, the government of Iran, which is been responsible for all of this. And as your amazing speaker before from Israel, he spoke about that, how expanded and extended to 5 countries destroyed. So even the Muslim Sunnah should know that Iran kills 1 million Sunnah, more than what Israel did through the beginning of the war with Palestine. So we have to know that. It's also, in my opinion, after I just want to explain why United States foreign policy, it's really like between the Republican and the Democrat now is back and forth, because even they learned from the war in Iraq and how much they criticize them, and so many Americans, they don't want to send their kids and loved one against again in the war. So the military action is really like very tight, and it will be really like combined with the political solution, which I think Biden now administration is doing it, but not comparing the right way, because even they have, as you said, Emily, in the beginning, we have to track the resources and the funding for the Iran government, Islamic regime government, and etc. Where is the money is coming, especially from the Captagon, from Assad, and also the laundry from the oil, and a little bit from the military here and there, and the gas, natural gas. So we have to know exactly the laundry money, the fake organization, all of this. And also we have to know, they count also on the Biden administration when they claim about it. They said they count on Qatar and Oman, ramp it up regionally, military deterrent, Persian Gulf, and also Biden administration try to avoid in the future, we're going to say that Biden administration is trying to avoid the Congress moderate review of a new Iran nuclear, especially when it comes to the tough election in 2024. In the matter of fact, also, we have to know that we cannot, the American United States cannot do it by itself for couples of reasons. I want to focus also, I'm not going to wrap it up, but just quickly on couples of very important we have important dates coming up in the September 19. We have, as I said, the President Ibrahim Raisi is again expected to lead the Iranian delegation in the United States General Assembly meeting. And also we have October 18. It's going to be very important also because the UN may be slated to lift the restriction on Iran research, development, and production of ballistic missiles. So this is two dates important, plus beside the important, which the other speakers mentioned it in the memorial of the victim, young lady, beautiful lady. Also, I just want to say also that we have to put in our consideration the oil. The SVP International estimate the Iran oil now production increase in August to the 3.15 million barrels, which it means per day. It means highest, the highest since 2018. In Venezuela, also the same. Biden administration seems heading for the lifting of the sanctions, which really, Emily and Danielle and Catherine, you can tell that this one by itself, it's impeach what the Democrats saying that the foreign policy is to focus on the human rights. How it comes to focus on human rights while you are, by doing so, funding that Islamic regime, and by funding it, it's giving her more power to kill more innocent people inside Iran and out. So this is, we have to put it also in our consideration. Also, just want to focus. The U.S. now, you can tell, Emily, that United States, send a lot of, service members in bases in Iraq to maybe in the future to close the border between Iraq and Syria, just in case if Iran been attacking militia, the United States, American militia and forces there. So we have many options, but the, Biden administration, to be honest with you, the limited for the options they have is very little, because they have to convince Congress and Republican and the lawmakers and also to rejoin the GCPA, and also to support any future a settlement or agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia when it comes with the Gulf state, when it comes to the peace, and the European government to let her lead that one. Otherwise, we have the only options for E3 and EU from Congress. And we know the conflict between the Russia and America right now, especially when United States support Ukraine. And we understand also the allies between the Iran when they, before, I believe 6 months ago, they sent weapons to Russia. So we have so many things. I just want to finish it in one thing. I think the tension between Russia and United States over the war against Ukraine have risen after the United States supported, as I said, Ukraine politically and military against Russia, and also reflected in Syria, because where Bashar Assad, the United States, when the earthquake happened in the first beginning of the 23, we understood that United States left some sanctions for the aid, humanitarian aid and others, but it helped to fund in other way Bashar Assad power, put him in power again, and also that he is the king of the Pentagon and who support Hezbollah and Iran, the Islamic Republican and the Iran government and Iranian even revolutionary army. So we have even the Iran government is still able to support itself financially through oil and Captacon resources, through its allies, also Hezbollah, Houthi and Hamas, by setting up fake organization and laundering money. So I hope that even while the USA issue a new law and sanctions on Iran and Hezbollah, even Assad in Kaiser Caesar Act, some sanctions were lifted, as I told you. It should be aware of that, not to fall again the United States government and its allies in Europe and Israel and also the other Gulf state, which also they need to focus not on also the political diplomatic issues, also in military when it's needed, and also in economic to tighten up all the resources here and there, and also to put more pressure to do the lobby in the Security Council to prevent Russia and China from doing the veto. And also in the end, we just mentioned Israel has struck most of Iran forces in Syria, which possess warehouse and weapons that threaten Israel's security. Therefore, the Congress in the future should also focus to protect the Israel border from that and put it in its consideration when it's the conflict with Russia and China, who always also using the veto. Thank you very much. I'm sorry it's been long.
No, you were great. Thanks for updating us after our many technical difficulties. But I mean, hey, it's an over 2-hour broadcast, so I guess there's bound to be glitches here and there, right? But I'm glad you guys have stayed with us. I see that Elika wants to add something, so I'll go to her, and then I want to open it up to a few more people if you'd like to ask questions from any of the experts who are still on board. I see we already have one from a user named Decado who told me that they are actually in Iran, so we would love to hear from them as well. Elika, take it away.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick comment. Yeah, I think Russia, maybe there was a misunderstanding. I think we are both in agreement about the decision with regards to Soleimani. I just didn't want to think anyone here to think that I was upset about Kotlet. I think, though, it is important to note that that was not an act that was approved by Congress. It was actually done pursuant to Trump's executive power. And I think, many people might not know that the executive has broad, kind of almost unfettered power. And in fact, Congress did try to impeach him over that decision, saying that it was unlawful. And I think that is just such a crucial point to bring up, because this is the problem that we're dealing with. Despite Soleimani's persistent threats and the numerous Americans that he killed, Congress went back and said, well, we didn't really see evidence of those threats. What threats are you talking about? Okay, and this is really unacceptable for Congress to have this attitude towards terrorism. And it just goes back to the problem that we have here in the West, right? And again, it all goes back to that, to the think tanks and the lobbies. And I think, can I just say that, first of all, I have been left my whole life, but it is really, we would be remiss not to identify the problems that are developing in Western leftist academic institutions. They have very, very favorable kind of perspectives about things like terrorism and, these people are just misunderstood. And they really kind of foment these types of narratives that are, pro regime and pro this kind of an acceptance or a diplomacy towards these kind of terrorist groups, you can say. So I think that, just even highlighting these things, highlighting the response to Soleimani, highlighting the general attitude, it really just reminds us it reminds us to always go back to the same issue, which is what is at the source of this? What is at the source of this narrative? And what are we, who are so much bigger in our numbers, going to do to counteract that? And I love, Emily, that you are making this the kind of point of this discussion. And I really, really hope that we can get somewhere with this and kind of take action in that direction. Thank you.
Thanks. If any of you have questions, now would be the time to ask. I know that we had one already. If you want to go ahead and take the mic, Decado.
Hello to everyone. First of all, I wanted to thank Mr. Behnam, and I'll say one sentence in Farsi to him. درود بر شما جناب. سخنانتون کاملا به جا بود. I told him that I salute him, and his points are 100% correct. I'm in Tehran, and I've grown up in Tehran. And as a young Iranian, every step I took in my life to make a life for myself, to do something for myself, I want to mention that this regime has dropped on me 1,000 obstacles. From the last year of my elementary school, that for asking a question, my teacher was not giving me a passing grade in Quran, which is a mandatory thing in Iran, to the point that I was working, and everywhere I turned, there was something that was a problem basically by this regime and the creating. My question is, in October, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the sanctions by JCPOA, according to JCPOA, the designations will be lifted in October, and Islamic regime can buy and sell weapons. Is there anything that has been set in place to prevent this from happening? Because if Islamic regime is allowed to buy and sell weapons from any country, it will be Islamic regime on steroids. And as Behnam perfectly mentioned, if we have a nuclear Iran, if we have an Iran that is powerful enough, not Iran, if we have Islamic regime that is powerful enough, they will not stop at our borders. They will not stop at killing our children or Syrian children. They will come for anyone they can if they have the power. This is what you need to understand. And our message as Iranians is one thing. We are asking for one thing and one thing only. Put IRGC on that list, have some actions on those sanctions, and isolate this regime politically, financially, 100%. Do not negotiate with terrorists. The only way to end this, the only way to save everyone is to isolate them. Help us choke these goddamn mullahs. Thank you for the mic.
Thank you. Does anyone want to answer that question? I mean, just briefly off the top of my head, of course, we know the United States is claiming that the money will only be used for humanitarian purposes, and that is somehow going to be guaranteed by Qatar, which we all know how reliable that's going to be. But I'd love to hear anyone else's take on that. Not all at once. Catherine, do you want to take?
Yeah.
Do you want to take it on?
I just want to say something. I don't know if it's going to answer the question, but I think indirectly it will. It's in reference to the deal that was made and the fact that now Qatar, will be used as some kind of financial conduit. The reason why this money was actually held in the first place has never been talked about. So the money was being sent. Well, an account was open in South Korea. It was an escrow account, and the deal was that South Korea was approached years and years ago by the Islamic Republic, asking for them to buy certain products from South Korea that had nothing to do with the sanctions. So they were non-sanctioned products. South Korea had to go to America to ask for permission. And then it was decided and agreed upon that an escrow account would be set up, and an agreement was struck by which Iran was to sell energy to South Korea, and Korea would put the money into the escrow account, and that money would be used to then purchase goods from South Korea, and South Korea would make sure that the goods would be then delivered to Iran. Now, as the month went by, South Korea noticed that Iran was actually asking for very weird products that might not be sanctioned, but put together painted a very disturbing pictures, which is why, you know, the escrow was put under lock and key and everything was suspended, and Iran was extremely angry because the energy had been delivered. And so they wanted their money worth of crude, saying, well, we delivered the goods, you didn't release the money, we don't have anything, you know, for it. This is not okay. Now, what I fear is that the same schema will be replicated with Qatar, by which Qatar would be, whether knowingly or not, is not even the point, would be brought into furnishing Iran with maybe not weapons, but products that could then be used, you know, to build weapons or to do God knows what. And I don't want to know whether it's Captagon, whether it's to finance human trafficking. This is not the point, but those are terrorist activities that we need to stop. So I think the issue is not just related to the nuclear weapons. And I think that, and this is my take on it, people may disagree, that Iran's pursuit of nuclear power is a distraction in a way, forcing the international community to have a great debate over this, while actually, in fact, they don't actually need to have a nuclear weapons. Yes, of course, they want it because it would mean that they would have immense leverage and they would be able to blackmail the international community. But I think that what they're trying to do is to build their military capacity. Because if you look at the trajectory of the Islamic Republic, not only have they enriched uranium, but they have had this grand military pursuit to develop, you know, new systems of defense, new systems of attack, you know, ballistic missiles, and all the rest of it. And we are missing this picture. We're not following what Iran is actually building on the ground because we are so focused on, you know, how far are they in building this weapon, that again we're not looking at the greater whole, and we're missing 90% of the picture. And Iran is a master of, you know, smokes and mirror games. They are master of distraction, and I think that this is what they're doing once again. While we're discussing one issue, we're not looking at the other thing that they're doing, at the other moves that they're making in the African continent, in Latin America. We are not looking at the way that radicalization and the militarization of the outposts here in the UK and other places are actually happening. And for me, I don't know again if I'm answering your question, but there's a greater issue when it comes to the Islamic Republic, and it's never what they talk about. You have to learn to read between the lines. You have to learn to pick up on the crumbs that they're giving us, and they are giving us many crumbs. We're not reading them correctly. Events are happening. We think it's disjointed. It is not disjointed. It's a picture that they're painting. We have to learn as a collective to read the regime. And in order to do this, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the regime, think like them, think the worst, and then you would be able to preempt on what they do and actually take the right actions and stop them where it hurts.
Thanks, Catherine. Jason, I don't know if you heard the full question, but we had a question about if there are any safeguards in place to prevent the regime from purchasing weapons or from using this money that is being unfrozen from being used for, shall we say, non-humanitarian purposes. I'm wondering if you have a response to that or a take on the safeguards or lack thereof in place for the misuse of money, whether it be sanction relief or otherwise, that goes to the Iranian regime.
Yeah, hi, Emily. Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. I think that the answer is yes and no, and let me explain what I mean by that. Technically, the Biden administration will tell you that it has complete oversight and visibility into how the $6 billion worth of assets are being spent that is going to be housed in Qatar for Iran to use for, quote, humanitarian purchases. But let's step back and look at the broader picture here. The $6 billion that is unfrozen, that allows the Islamic Republic to purchase food and medicine, frees up other assets within the general Iranian budget that allows it to invest more in repression at home and terrorism abroad. So it's that latter part of the situation that is most concerning here. And I would also say that there's a history of the Islamic Republic actually submitting fraudulent invoices for food and medical purchases, and it happened with the Halkbank case in Turkey, and the United States indicted Hawkbank as a result of those fraudulent enabling those fraudulent transactions. And there's, as many of your listeners know, a great deal of corruption inside the Islamic Republic when it comes to these very issues. I remember in 2019, the then chief of staff to Iran's president revealed that over $1 billion worth of hard currency to import basic goods had disappeared. So this history and the ability of the regime to now have a little more cushion in its budget to spend on repression is what's most concerning.
What if, I mean, anyone who wants to jump in, feel free, but I just wanted to follow up on that by asking what, if anything, can be done? I mean, on my level, I'm a private citizen. Like, what are the things that we can do to push back or to demand more oversight, or to demand, congressional approval for deals like what the Biden administration, I almost said Obama administration, the Biden administration are pushing through with this, potential prisoner exchange?
I'm happy.
Sorry.
I'm happy to start on that. First of all, let me say this. I know that a lot of the criticism in this room has been on the Biden administration, and rightfully so. But Congress has a role to play here also. And the reality is that serious oversight on U.S.-Iran policy has been lacking for a long time. In the U.S. House of Representatives, there has not been a single public oversight hearing on Iran policy since 2020. That's unacceptable. A lot has happened since then. In the Senate, there has only been one public oversight hearing on Iran policy, and that was in 2022 before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So there is a lack of public accountability for the Biden administration on its Iran strategy, and the only way to get that public accountability is for Congress to do its job. The good news is that Congress is starting to wake up. This week, there are now 2 hearings in the House of Representatives solely on Iran, and this is the first time since 2020 that it's happened. But the bad news is that those hearings will not feature current U.S. officials. And that is the weakness here. We have a lot of experts on the hearings that'll be held this week on the House, but they are not currently in the administration. And so we are lacking that public conversation here on Iran policy. And I would also say that, and this tracks back to some remarks that were previously made in the other space before it got closed out, I think that there's an incredible amount of energy in the Iranian diaspora, especially in the Iranian American community. I have never seen it like this before. There is a great deal of civic engagement that's taking place, and the Hill is really starting to wake up to this reality of Iranian Americans calling Hill offices, demanding oversight, demanding that the passage of important legislation like the Massa Act. And so that harnessing that energy and activism in a positive direction is what's going, and sustaining it is what's going to really help with accountability and keeping up the pressure on congressional offices, and with the congressional offices start to speak out, especially Democrats. We have to start getting the Democrats to speak out. The Republicans have been speaking out. I have not heard nearly enough from Senator Bob Menendez, who's been a real leader on a lot of these issues on the Democratic side of the Senate, speaking out about a lot of the understandings, the de-escalatory understandings that are taking place, the unfreezing of assets. We need to start encouraging Democratic lawmakers in the House and the Senate to start speaking out. It can't just be Republicans. It has to be bipartisan.
Thank you. That's actually one thing I was talking about earlier, how important this is, that this doesn't become a partisan issue. And unfortunately, we've seen some of the lobbying groups related to Iran, not the right ones, pushing the false narrative that the only choices, as Elika mentioned, are between diplomacy and war. And we know that there are a lot more options than that. So I think it's important we all continue to speak and to educate others about this as well. Elika, I know you wanted to add one more thing in response to the question that I was asking about what regulatory measures could be put in place to ensure that the Islamic Republic isn't using funds or these funds for terrorist purposes.
Yes. So what I was going to say about that is that unfortunately, I think any safeguards that could exist are completely irrelevant and redundant. The reason for that is because, as we know, money is fungible. So if you allocate, well, I think two things are happening at the same time that are really important to consider. From 2021, Biden laxed on enforcing sanctions over the regime. And for that reason, the regime has enjoyed its highest level of oil exports in the past 5 years. The regime is doing really well right now. We have not seen the trickle-down economy. We have not seen the conditions of the middle class improve because simply we know that they don't do anything for their citizens. So what's happening? Two things are happening here at the same time. One is that the regime is making a lot of money. And now the second thing that's happening is that $6 billion is being unfrozen for humanitarian aid. Now let's just imagine the highest level of safeguard that you can imagine, that every single penny of that money really goes towards humanitarian aid, right? Well, khosh behalashun is, as we say, good for them, because now they don't have to spend any of that money, and all of that $6 billion goes to all of the money that they make from their oil exports now goes to fund their proxy militias, to buying weapons and everything else that they do in furtherance of their terrorism. So to answer the question, I would say safeguards over that money, completely irrelevant. The regime's doing well, money's fungible, it's going to go, they will be able to fund their terrorism that way.
Thank you. Wish that wasn't what you were saying and wish I didn't agree, but I'm afraid you're probably right. Rasha, I see that you wanted to add something. Feel free.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for Elika and Jason. Jason, he nailed it. I start my speech in the first space when I spoke about the conflict between the Democrats and the Republican when it comes to even how to approach and how to put on the table everything important. And I mentioned in the first space when there is on Wednesday, this Wednesday, September 13, the hearing, which is really, as Jason, he mentioned, it's very important. There is so many witnesses going to be there are also should be recognized. And as Jason, we have Richard, we have Michael, the president and the CEO. I just shoot you, inbox you, Emily, the link for it, and the Victoria. There is so many important witnesses and testimony going to be heard in public, and it's been also some impeachment here and there. But back to your answer, Emily, or to your question, I do suggest that just learn from our experience as a Syrian. Also, when the United States or foreign policy, they did the law in regards to Caesar law to put the sanctions on the Assad regime and its allies in Lebanon whatsoever. They lift it and revoke it when it comes to an earthquake, which they use the aid relief, because they lift it because they said, okay, give them some left sanctions for ruling, just to use it for support the Syrian people in cause for the earthquake, relieving aid and humanitarian. But most of this money, when it comes to the Assad regime, he used it for supporting the militia and Iran and his allies. So we should be careful. So I suggest if all of us who has American citizenship will, send emails and phone calls and calls our representative in each state, whether it doesn't matter your background, whether from Syria, Lebanon, or American, whatsoever, we should call them and tell them to create a committee who should observe those money, $6 billion whatsoever, each penny, as Elika said, and do more research from the Iranian oppositioners who they can report also to this committee if something happened or anything wrong, or there is any leak, or they use it the Islamic regime, Iranian regime, they use it in other ways. So this is what I just want to add. We need to be learn from the history, and we know that Iran, as Michael McCall, he said, it's very naive to think that Iran was not going to have any control over the money. Thanks.
I think that's actually a really excellent point that you made, that you're both right in that we know that they're going to misuse these funds because they've done it before. But it's important, even if we're discussing for the next battle, for the next issue, or even the next, God forbid, regime that we have to deal with this way, if we have documentation and we have a place that's investigating it and that is able to document and say, hey, on this date you purchased X, that's a violation. And you end up with a list of all of these violations where all of these dollars went, that would be the best case scenario, because then nobody can really dispute that if we've been watching it from day one. I know Mehdi wanted to comment or ask a question. So I want to open the floor to you if you are still tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I think when it comes to the diplomatic, like sort of try for attacking the Islamic regime in international basis, there's not going to be many people more frustrated than me. By having a campaign with 1.5 million signatures approaching to the politician and getting their response, because their responses have no consequences for them. In other hand, we are facing a regime who is getting the billions of dollars for by selling oil, and posted that money through the lobbyist group. That's who we are facing. It's very frustrating to talk about diplomatic action against the Islamic regime by the people who are like the Iranian community. And the Iranian community are very frustrated. I have over 430 emails to the different Minister of Foreign Affairs, to the presidents, to the PMs, and all of that. And most of those responses has not been effective. They have just claimed what they've been involved against the Islamic regime of Iran, but none of them have been impacted the way that can stop the regime. The regimes always find a way through their lobbying group, through their allies here and there, to get over all those sanctions, all those barriers that the international committee putting in. And what I think it should happen, it's like the international committee should take responsibility of legitimizing this kind of regime, like Islamic regime in Iran, and make sure that every single act that this regime is doing is because they are still legitimized by the international communities, and what I'm acting at the moment is based on that. I was going to ask Jason about what would be the international consequences for those countries who are still dealing with this government. Thanks.
Well, let me make sure I understand. With the countries, could you just expand upon the question a little bit?
Like currently, at there are some ambassadors who are going to these religious bases and trying to increase the financial relation with them, especially like right after the COVID. And but as we all know, those religious bases, especially for the women's, they are advertising like child marriage or after the age of 9, like, and nobody has been responded to that in international aspect. Also, there are satellite services who are providing for the Islamic regime, then they have not been criticized because the regime using these satellite services that is run by the international communities to advertise their beliefs on anti-Semitism, child marriage, terrorizing the society, and all of that. I mean, there has not been any consequences for the, or they have not been questioned for providing these services to this regime, uh, and all because they are still keeping them as a legitimate regime. I was wondering if there any way we can increase these, or highlight this matter in the international community and make consequences on those satellite companies who um, uh, crash their what? Oh my God, Saham. I can't remember. Crash their financial situation to make it as a consequence, or showing the reality of what would be behind this financial relation to the Islamic Republic of Iran for the
Stocks, you
people
mean?
and children. Yes.
Well, this is something that my organization, Iwani, is very much involved in warning companies, countries, and the public of the business risks of engaging in the Islamic Republic's market. So I think that naming and shaming does impact business decisions. We've seen it very closely and have been intimately involved in it, and we are laser-like focused on Europe, especially because there are some European companies, as you may know, who are still doing business with the Islamic Republic, and I think that these companies care about their reputational reputation, and really seizing on that and making it known to the wider public who they are funding and who through their business, and the risks of and also it's not just funding. Let's remember there were some European companies like Bosch recently who did business with the Islamic Republic during the time when the JCPOA was being fully implemented. Cameras were sold to the Islamic Republic, and the cameras are now being used to surveil the Iranian people on the streets as a part of the hijab enforcement. So I think that that's an indictment that on all these kinds of businesses that are still doing business in the Iranian marketplace, and naming and shaming and really campaigning against these companies that are still involved in the Iranian market to a certain extent is very important and does have impact. So I would encourage you to look into that.
Guys, I'm sorry to close this up, but we have gone actually much longer than our scheduled time for the broadcast. I apologize again for all the technical difficulties. I know we had a lot of glitches and different platforms, but I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on and to spend so much time talking about this issue, brainstorming about what different solutions we can come up with, and in general, just being a voice of solidarity with the Iranian people and raising awareness about what's going on. So I first and foremost want to thank all of you. And this will be available. Let's see, it will be available on YouTube, but the original space and this space will be on social media of Daniel and myself as well. Daniel, do you have any closing words that you wanted to add?
I do, yes. Please, guys, if you like the content, subscribe, share everything you can. I also want to thank Ruchi Avital, who was a simultaneous and consecutive interpreter, court interpreter, Hebrew and English in both directions, and also written translation Hebrew to English. She did all of the translation for Eliyahu today, and that's how he was able to participate. It's very grueling, and she put up with it for as long as she could, but then she had to drop off once she ran out of steam. But she's also been a lecturer and interpreter at Bar Ilan for 20 years. And with that, I'm just going to say thank you so much for Emily, Catherine, Rasha, Jason, everybody else who came to join us. Dr. Kedar, Mordechai. It's a long list. It was a big space. I appreciate all of you guys coming. I am so happy that you gave freely of your time and educated all of us on all these very important issues. And I would love to do it again. We'll see what we can put together, depending on everyone's availability.
I'm sorry to cut you, Daniel. Can I just say a few words very, very quickly?
Of course, Catherine.
Go for it. Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. I just wanted to let you know, myself and a couple of friends are actually running a campaign under our company called Forward Strategy. We're going to have a social media campaign that we're going to launch on the 13th, on the day of the arrest of Mahsa Amini, and on the 16th, on the day of her death. And if you would like to take part, can you please reach out to me on Twitter, and I will exactly tell you what we need from you guys. And thank you in advance for those who do want to participate, and those who do not. If you could just watch the space on Twitter, we're going to be posting loads and loads of videos, and we have some incredible people supporting us with a message of solidarity to the Iranian people. So please watch that space. Thank you.
Oh, one last thing I was going to say is that we always do an open mic after the space. So if anybody who still wants to talk and didn't get to talk, wants to express their opinion or ask questions, come to the open space. It'll be open within a couple of minutes after this event ends. Emily, anything further?
That's it. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good day or night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.